This is the story of a poor woman named Susie and a billionaire named Parker. One was hungry and cold, the other had everything money could buy. But one rainy morning in Lagos, their lives crossed in a way no one expected, and what happened after will make you cry. It was a cold morning, the rain was falling. Slowly cars rushed past on the busy Lagos road. Susie stood at the corner holding her baby Julia. Close to her chest, the baby was wrapped in a thin cloth. She was crying softly. Her body was cold. Her face was wet. Susie had no umbrella, no jacket, no food, no home. Her slippers were torn. Her dress was soaked, but she did not move. She could not move last night. She and her baby had nothing to eat, not even one spoon of food. So this morning, even though the rain was falling, she was ready to stand by the roadside until someone helped. It wasn't because she wanted the food so badly for herself, but because her baby was hungry and she could not watch her child suffer again. People walked past, some looked at her with pity, some looked away. Two men stood near her and whispered, "Why is she standing there in the rain?" "Maybe it's her job," the other man said. "A lot of people pretend just to get free money. Some even go as far as renting a baby to attract pity." Susie heard them, but she said nothing. She just wiped Julia's face and rocked her gently. Susie stretched out her hand. Her voice was soft, tired, but full of pain. "Please help me, just small food for my baby. She has not eaten. Please," she looked down at Julia's face. The baby's lips were dry. Her cry was now weak. Susie held her tighter. "Don't worry, my baby. Mommy will find food today. Even if I have to stand here all day, help will come." But Susie did not know that help was closer than she thought. Inside a black Jeep, a man sat at the back seat. His name was Parker. He was very rich, the kind of rich that made people look twice. When he walked by today, he was going to his office very early. He had a big meeting with some foreign people who wanted to work with his company. This meeting was very important. It could help his company grow and bring more business from different parts of the country. The road was busy. The cars were moving slowly. It was the usual Lagos traffic. Parker leaned back in his seat and looked out through the glass, and then something caught his eye. He sat up. A young woman was standing by the roadside. She was holding a baby. The rain was still falling, not too heavy, but steady enough to soak someone. The baby was already wet. The woman looked tired, worn out, almost like she had no strength left. Parker's eyes stayed on her. He saw how she held the baby tightly, like that child was the only thing she had left in the world. She wasn't moving. She wasn't shouting. She just stood there asking quietly for help. Parker felt something deep inside. He knew this wasn't ordinary. A person begging with a little baby in the rain. This was pain, real pain. He looked at her again, and then he made a decision: stop the car. Parker said. The driver looked back. "Sir, just stop." The driver pulled over and stopped the car. Parker opened the door. He stepped into the rain. His shoes touched the wet road. His suit began to get wet, but he didn't care. He walked slowly toward the woman. Susie didn't notice him. She was busy rocking her baby Julia. The baby was still crying, soft and tired. Parker stood in front of her. Susie looked up. She was surprised to see a tall man standing so close. She looked at his face. He looked serious but kind. "Good morning," Parker said gently. Susie said nothing. She only nodded. He looked at the baby. "What's her name?" "Julia," Susie replied softly. Parker stepped closer and looked at Julia's face. She was shaking her lips, trembled as she cried quietly. "Has she eaten?" he asked. Susie shook her head. "No, sir, not since yesterday." Parker looked at her soaked clothes. Her hands were freezing from the cold. "And have you eaten?" Susie looked down. "No, sir, but it's okay. I just want to find food for my baby." Parker stayed quiet for a moment. He looked at both mother and child. Then he said, "Come with me." Susie looked up confused. "Sir, come, let me help you." Susie stood still. She looked at Parker. She was afraid. She had never spoken to a rich man before. She didn't know what to think. But when she looked at his eyes, they were calm. They were kind. She looked down at Julia. The baby was still shaking. Her tiny fingers were cold. Susie took a deep breath. Then she nodded slowly. She followed Parker toward the black car. The driver opened the door. Susie stepped in, holding Julia close to her chest. She sat carefully at the edge of the seat, afraid to touch anything. The driver looked at her through the mirror. He didn't say a word, but his eyes were full of questions. Susie avoided his eyes. She looked at her baby and kept rocking her gently beside her. Parker sat quietly. He looked ahead as the car moved, but his mind was full of thoughts. Who was this woman? What had happened to her? And how did she end up like this, inside the car? Parker picked a small towel from the seat. He handed it to Susie. Here, he said, use this to dry the baby. Susie took the towel quickly. Thank you, sir. She said her hands were shaking as she wrapped it around Julia. Parker looked at her. Her dress was still wet. Her hair was dripping, but she didn't complain. She was only focused on her baby. What's your name? He asked Susie. She replied softly, Okay, Susie. Where is your home? Susie looked down. She didn't speak at first. Then she said in a low voice, We sleep on the street, sir. Parker nodded slowly. He didn't show shock. He just breathed in and said, All right, I'll take you somewhere safe. Susie looked up. Her eyes were wide. Really, sir? Parker nodded. Yes, somewhere. Dry and warm. You and Julia need rest and food. Tears filled Susie's eyes, but she wiped them quickly. Thank you, sir. God bless you. Parker said nothing more. He looked out the window deep in thought, but Susie did not know that this was just the beginning. Parker looked at his watch again. He knew he was almost late for the meeting. The foreign representatives might be waiting at his office already. It was an important meeting, one that could affect a significant growth in his company. But he looked at Susie. He looked at her baby Julia. They were both tired, cold, hungry. He shook his head no. He said to himself, They need food first. He told the driver to stop at a small restaurant. They went inside. Parker didn't care who was watching. He ordered hot rice, fried plantain chicken, and warm milk for the baby. He asked them to bring water. Susie sat at the edge of the chair, still holding Julia. Her stomach was turning. She had not eaten in 2 days when the food came. She looked at Parker. Can I eat here, sir? She asked softly. Parker nodded. Yes, eat. Susie bowed her head. She placed Julia on her lap and fed her the warm milk. Then she started eating. She ate slowly at first, like someone who was afraid the food would disappear. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she chewed. Parker watched in silence. He didn't speak. He just waited when she finished. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Then she looked up at Parker. Her voice was quiet. Thank you, sir. God bless you, sir. See you right. Parker leaned forward. Tell me what happened to you. How did you end up like this? Susie looked down at her baby. Then she began to speak. Sir, I don't have anyone in this world. My parents died when I was a little girl. I grew up in an orphanage in Ibadan. Life was hard, very hard as I grew older. I learned how to survive. I worked in people's houses. I cleaned. I washed. I cooked anything I could do to survive. She looked at Julia's face and kissed her forehead. Then one day I met Jacob. He was a taxi driver in Lagos. But he came from a neighboring country. He was kind. And we became close. We loved each other. After 1 year, he said we would get married. She paused. Parker was still listening. The restaurant was quiet. A few months later, I found out I was pregnant. I was scared at first, but when I told Jacob he was happy, he said he was ready to marry me. But he needed to travel home and tell his family. He said it was their tradition that he must tell his family first before bringing his fiancée home. Her voice broke. That was the last time I saw him. Parker blinked. He sat up straight. What do you mean? Susie nodded slowly. He promised to come back in 1 week, but he never came back. His number stopped going. I waited. I cried. I begged his friends, but no one knew anything, or maybe they were just hiding the truth. I don't know. I had no money left. I lost the house. I was staying in. No job would take me because of the pregnancy, so I started sleeping outside. I begged for food. She wiped her eyes now. Julia is all I have. Parker's heart was heavy. He looked at the little girl now sleeping peacefully. Then he looked at Susie. She was still young, still full of hope, but life had treated her like nothing. Parker took a deep breath. He made a quiet promise in his heart. This is not where her story will end. Parker reached into his pocket. He brought out some money. Then he placed it on the table in front of Susie. "Take this," he said. "It will help you and your baby for now." Susie looked at the money. Her hands began to shake. "Sir, this is too much," she said quietly. "I can't take all of this." Parker looked her in the eyes. "Take it," he said again gently. "You need it." Susie looked down at Julia, who was still asleep in her arms. She picked the money and held it close to her chest. Then she bowed her head. "Thank you, sir. May God bless you." Parker nodded. He smiled a little. Then he looked at his wristwatch. His eyes widened. The time for his meeting had already passed. The foreign guests were probably already at his office. He stood up quickly. "I have a very important meeting this morning," he said. "It will last for about 3 hours." He brought out a card from his wallet. It was his business card. It had his name and number on it. He handed it to her. "Call me after 3 hours," he said. "I will come to wherever you are and take you and your baby to a safe place." Susie held the card carefully like it was gold. She wanted to speak, but something held her back. She didn't have a phone, not even a small one. She looked at Parker's face. She wanted to tell him, but her lips didn't move. "Thank you, sir," she said. Instead, she thought fast. "Now that I have some money, maybe I could pay someone to help me make the call when the time comes." Parker gave her one last look. "I'll be waiting for your call," he said. Then he turned and walked out of the restaurant. Susie sat there holding Julia with one hand and the business card in the other. For the first time in a long while, she had hope. After sitting in the restaurant for a while, Susie stood up. She took the business card Parker gave her and folded it neatly. She didn't want to lose it, so she slid it into a small pocket sewn inside Julia's tiny clothes. The baby was still sleeping. She touched the pocket to make sure it was safe. Then she held Julia close to her chest as she stepped out of the restaurant. Her baby's blanket shifted a little. She tried to adjust it without waking Julia. She didn't know the card had fallen out. It landed on the wet ground near the restaurant door. Nobody noticed by now. The rain had stopped. The sun was peeking out. Susie walked slowly, then boarded public transportation, back to the same place where Parker had met her. She saw the small shop near the corner. Where she had begged earlier that morning, the shop owner was not there, but the shade was still dry. She sat on the edge of the small wooden bench. She didn't know the card was gone. She thought to herself, "I'll wait here until it's time to call, then I'll pay someone to help me." But now there was no card, no number, nothing at exactly noon. Parker stood up from his seat in the meeting room. The foreign guests had just left. Everything had gone well. He should have been smiling, but his mind went somewhere else. He frowned a little. He reached into his pocket and looked at his phone. No missed calls. He looked at the time again. 5 hours had passed. He sat down and stared at the floor. "Why hasn't she called me?" he asked himself. "Did she forget?" He rubbed his fingers together. Maybe she never planned to call. Maybe she's one of those people who beg for a living. His face grew serious, but she didn't look like that. She looked scared. She looked broken. He remembered how she cried while eating. He remembered how she held her baby close, as if the world was trying to take her away. He sighed deeply. "I told her I would take her to a safe place just for her baby's sake. Why wouldn't she want that?" He stared at his phone again. Still no call after a while. He placed the phone on his desk and returned to his work. But in his heart, he wasn't at peace. And outside in another part of the city, Susie sat quietly in the shade, still waiting, still holding Julia, with no idea the card was gone. It was lunchtime. Parker got into his black SUV and sat quietly for a moment. He looked out the window, deep in thought. Then he turned to his driver and said, "Take me to that small restaurant we went to this morning, the one where I took the woman and her baby." The driver nodded and started the engine. As the car moved through the streets of Lagos, Parker kept looking out. He was hoping just maybe she would still be nearby. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Something didn't feel right. What if she tried to call, but couldn't? What if something happened to her? The questions kept growing in his mind. They got to the restaurant. Parker quickly stepped out. He looked around. His eyes moved from one corner to another. Nothing, no sign of Susie, no sign of the baby. He walked slowly toward the restaurant entrance. His steps were quiet just as he reached the door. He saw something on the wet floor. He bent down there. It was the business card he had given Susie. It was wet. The edges were soft from the rain. The words on it were still clear. He picked it up and stared at it. His heart sank. "Did she throw this away?" he whispered. "Or did it fall off without her knowing?" He looked around again. Still nothing. He held the card tightly in his hand. Then he walked into the restaurant and sat at the same table they had used earlier. A waitress came to him. "Good afternoon, sir. What would you like to eat?" He looked at her without smiling. "Just give me rice and chicken," he said softly as the waitress walked away. Parker leaned back in his chair. He placed the wet card on the table. He kept staring at it. In his mind, two voices were speaking. One said, "She left. She never planned to call." The other said, "She lost the card, and maybe she's still waiting for you." He didn't know which voice to believe, but one thing was clear: he couldn't stop thinking about what the woman's little baby might be going through far away in another part of the city. Susie was still seated quietly in the shade. Little Julia was still sleeping in her arms. Susie looked tired. Her eyes were red at this point. She thought it was the right time to call Mr. Parker. So she slowly opened the small pocket in Julia's clothes to check the business card again. Her hand stopped. Her heart jumped. It was gone. She searched again, shaking the small clothes, checking her own wrapper. Nothing. She stood up and looked around the ground. Still nothing. Tears filled her eyes. "Oh, no, no, no," she cried softly. She sat back down, holding Julia close. "This is not happening," she whispered. "God finally sent someone to help me. Someone kind, and now I've lost his card." She wiped her face with her wrapper, but the tears kept falling. "Parker, he said he would come for us. He said we would be safe." She remembered his voice, his kind eyes, the money he gave her, the food, and now there was no way to reach him. She held Julia tighter. "I'm so sorry, baby. Mommy lost it. I lost the only chance we had." Her heart was heavy. Her lips were shaking. Then suddenly a thought came to her. Maybe it dropped inside the bus I entered, or maybe at the restaurant where he took us to eat." She looked up. She knew the bus was long gone. She had no idea which bus number it was, but the restaurant? Yes, she remembered the street. She remembered the table inside. She could find it. She stood up, still crying, but with new hope. "I must go back. Maybe the card is still there. Maybe someone kept it safe." She wrapped Julia properly on her back and began walking fast down the road. She prayed quietly, "God, please let me find it. Let this not be the end of our help." Her feet were tired, her body was weak, but her heart kept moving. She found a small yellow bus going towards the area. She climbed in and sat quietly. She didn't speak much. Her eyes stayed on the road. Every stop made her heart beat faster. Finally, the bus stopped at the bus stop close to the restaurant. She came down, looked around, and walked quickly. Would the card still be there? She didn't know, but she was ready to find out. Parker sat quietly in the restaurant, finishing his food. His mind was still on the card. He picked it up, cleaned it with a tissue, and looked at it for a while. He let out a long sigh and stepped out of the restaurant. His driver opened the car door, and Parker stepped in. "Let's go back to the office." "Samrard," he said as Parker's car pulled out from the front of the restaurant. Susie was just a few steps away. She didn't see his face through the dark car window. He didn't see her either. By the time she reached the restaurant, the car was gone. She stood in front of the door, breathing hard. She walked in slowly, holding her baby to her chest, looking around. Everything looked the same, but something was missing. She went to the same table where they ate that morning. The table was clean. No card, no sign. She bent down and checked under the table. Nothing. She turned to one of the waitresses nearby. "Excuse me, please, did anyone find a small card here?" Susie asked, her voice shaking. The waitress looked at her and shook her head. "No, madam, we cleaned the whole place. Nothing like that." Susie's eyes were full of tears. She stepped outside, holding Julia close. Julia had started crying. Susie tried to calm her, but her own tears were falling too. Her only chance was gone, and she had no idea how close she had been to getting help. She turned and walked away slowly, not knowing that the man she was looking for had just left only seconds before that night. Susie sat on the cold floor of the unfinished building. It was dark. There were no windows, just broken walls and open space. She placed some old clothes on the floor and laid Julia down gently. Julia was already asleep, her tiny hand resting on Susie's arm. Susie sat beside her, staring at the ceiling with tears in her eyes. She whispered, God, I don't want my child to grow up like this. Please help us. She thought of Parker, his face, his kindness, the way he looked at her and her baby. Then she thought of the card she had lost. She pressed her hands against her chest and sighed deeply. Maybe I'll never see him again. No, she said softly, but just before closing her eyes, she made a decision, a quiet but strong decision. I will go back to that spot, the same place he saw me. Maybe he might pass there again. She didn't sleep much. The wind blew through the open space. Mosquitoes bit her arms. Julia cried in the middle of the night. Still, she held on by early morning. Susie was already up. She cleaned Julia with some water from a small bowl. She dressed her up and brushed her hair gently. She looked at Julia and smiled. We will be okay, I promise. Susie was not hungry that morning. Parker had given her enough money to feed them for even more than a week, but today was not about food. Today was about hope. She left the building and walked down the road with her baby on her back. She didn't beg. She just stood at the same spot where Parker had seen her that first morning, waiting. Hoping would he pass this way again? She didn't know, but she was ready to wait for as long as it would take. The sun was already high. In the sky, it was a bright and happy morning, and Parker's house today was special. His younger brother, Silam, was coming back home after 17 long years, 17 years away in Atlanta. Parker had been waiting for this day. He didn't go to the office. He had planned everything. He informed the driver early and said, please go to the airport. My brother's landing this morning. Make sure you're there on time. Yes, sir. The driver replied and left quickly. Parker walked around the house with a smile on his face. He went into the kitchen and spoke with the chef. Make sure there's fried rice. Joe Laugh grilled chicken, goat meat, and pounded yam. My brother loves pounded yam. The chef smiled. Don't worry, sir. Everything will be ready before he arrives. Then Parker picked up his phone and called 3 of his closest friends. Salem is arriving today. Come over. Let's welcome him. They all agreed to come. Laughter was already filling the air in the compound. Music was playing softly in the background. Parker stood at the balcony and looked out with joy in his heart. This is a good day, he whispered, but far away in the city. Susie was still standing by the road. Julia was tied to her back. Her eyes were tired, but her heart was still strong. She looked at every black SUV that passed. But unfortunately today, the driver had gone with Parker's newest red SUV. She waited and prayed. Maybe Parker would pass by again. Maybe today would be the day her life would change. But she didn't know that Parker was at home laughing and waiting for his brother. She didn't know that the man she was praying to meet again was not coming out today, not even close. God, please don't forget me. She said the day was still young, but the wait was getting long at the airport. Parker's driver stood by the entrance of the pickup area, holding a small sign that said, Salem. Soon a tall man with a wide smile and a trolley full of suitcases came out of the airport. Salem saw the man with the sign that had his name on it and smiled. He walked over. You must be Parker's driver. Yes, sir, the driver said, taking the trolley as they drove out of the airport. Salem rolled down the window and looked around. This place has really changed. He said. The driver smiled. Yes, sir. A lot has changed since you left. But as they moved deeper into the city, the car began to slow down. Cars were everywhere. Trucks, buses, tricycles, and bikes honking filled the air. The driver sighed. This traffic has started again. Salem laughed and leaned back. How do you people cope with this chaos? The driver laughed. We just have to. This is Lagos, the most populous city in Africa. They both laughed, but just then, as the car moved slowly again, the driver looked ahead. His smile dropped for a second. There by the side of the road, a young woman was standing with a baby tied to her back. She looked tired, and she was the same woman Parker had taken to the restaurant with her baby yesterday. The same woman he went back to the restaurant to look for, the same woman who gave her baby food before eating herself. The driver's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Salem noticed the change in his face. Is something wrong? Salem asked. The driver shook his head. No, sir. Just this traffic. He didn't know what to do. Should I stop? Should I call my boss? But he wasn't sure, so he kept driving. But he kept looking at her through the mirror, and inside his heart, he knew that woman was important. About 19 minutes later, the black SUV drove into Parker's big mansion as soon as the car stopped. Salem stepped out and looked around. The house was beautiful with flowers by the gate. Everything was clean and shiny. Suddenly, the front door opened. Parker stepped out with a big smile on his face. "Salem!" he shouted. "Brother!" Salem laughed and opened his arms. They hugged each other tight. "You look good," Parker said, holding his brother's shoulder. "And you look richer." Salem teased. They both laughed. Just then, some of Parker's close friends came out, too. They shook hands with Salem and welcomed him warmly. There was laughter, smiles, and drinks in hand, but one person was not smiling. The driver. He stood quietly beside the car, looking worried. His eyes moved to Parker. Every few seconds he needed to talk, and he needed to talk fast before the woman left that spot. As everyone began walking into the mansion, the driver followed quietly. He didn't say a word. He just stood by the main door and waited. Soon Parker walked toward the kitchen to check on the food. The chef was busy inside, slicing meat and frying. The driver quickly followed behind. "Excuse me, sir," he said in a low voice. Parker turned around. "Yes, what is it?" The driver took a deep breath. "Sir, I saw her." Parker's face changed. "Who?" "The woman from yesterday, sir. The one with the baby. She was standing at the same spot where you met her before." Parker went quiet. His eyes looked down like he was thinking deeply. Then he spoke slowly. "The woman who threw away my card. Does she really want help?" He remembered the rain. He remembered the way she covered her baby with her wrapper in the rain. He remembered her saying, "My baby didn't eat last night." He felt something move in his chest. Maybe she was just scared. Maybe she did not throw the card away deliberately. He looked at the driver and said, "Go back to that spot now. If she's still there, ask her why she didn't call me. If her reason makes sense, and if her face shows that she really wants help, bring her to me." The driver nodded. "Yes, sir." He turned and walked out fast. Susie was still standing by the roadside. She looked tired. Little Julia was quiet in her arms. The sun was hot now, and the baby's tiny head was sweating. Susie looked down the road again. Her eyes searched for any sign of Parker's car, but nothing. She looked at the sky, then at her baby. Her heart was beginning to sink. "It's past 12 already," she said softly. If he was going to the office like yesterday, he would have passed by now. She looked up again, still hoping. Then she whispered, Maybe he didn't go to work today, or maybe he went through a different route." Or, she sighed and looked at Julia. "Let's go, my baby. Let's find somewhere with shade." She was just about to turn and walk away when she heard a voice behind her. "Madam," she stopped. She turned quickly. A red SUV had stopped by the roadside. The window rolled down. The man inside pointed at her. "Wait," he said. She looked closely. It was Parker's driver. Her eyes opened wide. Her heart jumped. She held Julia tighter as the driver opened the door and stepped out. Susie took a small step forward. The moment their eyes met, tears filled hers. She didn't cry loud, but the tears were there. She quickly spoke, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry," she said. "I lost the card he gave me yesterday. I looked everywhere. I went back to the restaurant, but it wasn't there." The driver looked at her. He saw the tired face, the sweat, the way she held her baby like gold. She wasn't faking it. She wasn't pretending. She looked like a woman who had cried in silence all night. He didn't need to ask anything else. "Please follow me, Far," he said gently. Susie nodded. He opened the back door. She climbed in with Julia. The driver got in and started the engine as they drove off. Susie looked out of the window. She didn't know what was waiting for her at the end of that ride, but in her heart she whispered, "Thank you, God, thank you." The red SUV drove into Parker's compound and stopped at the carport. The driver came down first and gently opened the back door for Susie. She stepped out slowly, holding Julia close. Her heart was beating fast. She looked up at the big house. It was like a dream. Everything looked beautiful. The driver smiled softly. "Come with me." She followed him as they entered the house. The sound of laughter came from the sitting room. Parker was there, sitting with his brother Salem and a few other guests. They were still talking and laughing, but the moment Parker looked up and saw Susie, his smile faded. He stood up slowly. Susie moved quickly toward him. Still holding Julia, She dropped to her knees to greet him, but Parker rushed to her and held her arms. "No, please," he said gently. "Don't do that." She stood shaking. Everyone turned to look. The room went quiet. No one said a word, but their eyes were full of questions. Parker didn't explain. He only turned to her and said, "Come with me." He led her away from the sitting room and down the hallway. He opened the door to one of the guest rooms. It was clean and fresh. "Please," he said softly, "take a proper bath, you and your baby. You can rest here." Susie nodded slowly, still looking around like she wasn't sure if this was real. Parker left her there and went straight to the kitchen. He called the chef. "There's a woman in the guest room," Parker said firmly. "Make sure she eats well. Don't delay." "Sir, are you on?" "Yes, sir." The chef replied later that evening. After everyone had left, Parker sat in the living room with Salem and Susie. Susie looked cleaner now she had changed into fresh clothes the maid gave her. Julia was fast asleep in her arms. Parker looked at her. "You said you lost the card?" he asked gently. Susie nodded. "Yes, sir. I looked everywhere for it. I even went back to the restaurant, but I didn't see it." She paused, then added, "My phone. It got bad before I gave birth. I've not had a phone since then." Salem listened quietly. Parker had already told him a little about the woman and what happened the day before. Now seeing her like this, Salem felt something deep inside his chest. He looked at the baby and then at Parker. Parker leaned forward. "I can't change the past," he said, "but I can help your future," Susie looked at him speechless. Parker continued, "I want you to think, is there any business you want to do, anything you're good at, or something you'd like to learn? Tell me and I'll set it up for you." Susie blinked, then he added, "You'll be staying here for now until I find you a place of your own." Like, tears rolled down her cheeks this time. She didn't try to hide them. She looked at Julia, then she looked at Parker. "Thank you," she whispered. Salem smiled a little and looked at his brother. Parker simply nodded, but in his heart he knew he had just made a decision that would change this woman's life forever. A few days later, Parker walked into the guest room and smiled at Susie. "Get ready," he said, "we're going out." "Out?" she asked, as surprised he nodded. "Yes, you and Julia need something important." Soon they were on the road. Parker didn't say much, but Susie held Julia close and looked out the window. She still couldn't believe all this was happening to her. They arrived at a big clothing shop. Parker led them inside. "Pick anything you like," he said. Susie looked at him with wide eyes. "Sir, what do you mean?" "I mean it." He smiled. "You and Julia. You both deserve it." At first, Susie was shy. She touched some of the clothes and dropped them again. But Parker encouraged her soon. She picked a few pretty dresses for herself and some nice baby clothes for Julia. When they were done, the cashier packed everything nicely. Parker paid for everything. Susie's eyes were full of joy. "Thank you, sir," she said. "Thank you so much." But Parker wasn't done yet. Next, they went to a phone shop. He asked the seller to bring a new phone, one that was strong and easy to use. Then he took her to the telecom outlet there. He helped her retrieve her old phone number. Susie held the phone like it was gold. "God bless you, sir," she said with tears in her eyes. "I don't even know what to say." Parker simply smiled. "You don't have to say anything." They returned to the mansion. When they stepped inside, Salem was already sitting in the living room waiting. He stood up as they entered Parker. He said, "There's a place I want you to go with me, and I'd also like Susie to come along." Parker looked at Susie. She nodded quietly. They all left the house together and entered the car. Nobody said much during the drive. Susie kept wondering what this was about. She looked at Julia, who was asleep in her arms, and prayed in her heart. After some time, the car stopped in front of a tall apartment building. Salem told the driver to park. Then they all came down. Parker looked at Salem. "Where are we?" "Just follow me." Salem said. They walked into the compound. As they reached the door of one of the apartments, Salem stopped. He turned and looked at Susie. "When I heard your story," he began slowly, "it reminded me of our mother." Susie listened, not sure where he was going with it. Salem's voice became softer. "She was a single mother. He said she raised Parker and me all by herself. I remember how she used to cry at night. I would see her when I woke up, but I couldn't do anything. We were too small to help her." Susie's eyes were already wet. Her hands shook as she held Julia tighter. Salem continued. She passed before we made money, before we could show her the love she truly deserved. That pain has never left me. Then Salem reached into his pocket. He brought out a small key. This apartment, he said, is for you. Susie's knees gave way. She dropped to the ground and began to cry loudly. Oh God, she cried. What did I do to deserve this kindness? Parker was quiet. He looked at Salem, shocked. He had wanted to help Susie, but now it was his brother who had taken it even further. Parker walked up to him and hugged him tight. I am proud of the man you've become, he said with a heavy voice. I just wish Mommy was here to see this. Sem held his brother's hand and smiled. Then he turned to Susie again. I've also made plans to open a supermarket for you. He said, don't worry. We'll get a good manager, but you'll be the supervisor. And with time, you'll learn how to manage it fully by yourself. Susie cried even more. She didn't know what to say, but in her heart, she knew her life would never be the same again. Weeks passed quietly. Susie's life had changed in ways she never imagined. She now had a clean house to sleep in, food to eat, and a big supermarket with her name on it. The shelves were full. Customers came in every day. She was no longer begging on the street with baby Julia tied to her back one warm afternoon. She was in the office inside her supermarket, writing down sales and checking her books. Julia was sleeping in a small crib beside her. Suddenly, her phone rang. It was a strange number. She stared at the screen for a moment, unsure whether to answer. Something told her to pick the call. She pressed the green button and held the phone to her ear. The voice on the other end was a woman's voice. It was calm but carried deep sadness. Hello, is this Susie? Yes, this is Susie, she answered slowly. There was a pause. I'm calling from a nearby country, the voice continued. My name is Evelyn. I'm Jacob's cousin. At the sound of Jacob's name, Susie froze, her eyes filled with tears. Instantly, she hadn't heard that name in so long. I've been trying this number for over a year, the woman said, but it was always off. I only got through today. Susie didn't speak. She held her breath, listening. My cousin Jacob. He came into the country the same day he left you, the woman said gently. There was an accident, a bad one. He never made it home. Susie held her chest. Her heart felt heavy. He was in coma for 4 months. The woman went on. He never woke up. He passed away quietly. A long silence filled the line. I saw the messages you sent him, Evelyn added. I saw the love in your words. I knew he was serious about you. Susie wiped her face. She didn't know what to say from the messages. I believe there's a child, the woman said softly. Is there? Yes, Susie whispered. Her name is Julia. She is his daughter. Her voice broke as she said it, but she didn't hide it anymore. The woman on the phone let out a deep sigh. Jacob's mother is still alive. She said she's very old now. She cries every day. She thinks Jacob left this world without leaving or anything, but now there's hope. Susie took a deep breath and spoke with calm strength. Don't worry, she said. I'll make arrangements to bring Julia to see her. She must meet her granddaughter. I'll do everything I can to make it happen. The woman on the other end began to cry softly. Thank you, she said. After the call ended, Susie sat alone in the small office. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Not tears of pain, but tears of peace. For so long, she had lived with questions, she had lived with silence. But now she knew the truth. Jacob didn't abandon her. He never came back because he couldn't. He was already fighting for his life. Susie had finally found closure, and now her daughter Julia would grow up knowing where she came from. A few days later, Parker and Salem came by the supermarket. They saw Susie smiling again, this time from a place deep inside her. Parker placed his hand on her shoulder. You're strong, he said, and she was, because even though life had tried to break her, she stood up again. Not with hate, not with anger, but with hope. And with that, a new chapter began for Susie and her daughter Julia. Real wealth is not in money, but in how we treat people who can't pay us back. We rise by lifting others. And even when life seems unfair, don't give up. Sometimes the help you need is watching you quietly, ready to show up when you least expect it. Also, never judge people by what they're going through. Everyone has a story, And with just one act of kindness, you can become the turning point in someone's life. Now tell me, what did you learn from Susie's story? Was there a moment that made you cry or smile? Let me know in the comments section. I would love to read your thoughts. A brand new story is coming in just a few days. It's deep, emotional, and full of unexpected twists. So please subscribe to my channel, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss it if this story touched you. Don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends and family. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate you. See you in the next